Hey, Pepin.
Yo, 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 yo.
I've been thinking a lot lately about the pyramids.
The pyramids, like of Giza?
Yeah, like all the pyramids from all over that one Egypt.
Oh, we talking like Illuminati now? Like, because the Illuminati is in Egypt, correct? I mean, they're everywhere.
That's part of where they're at, but I was thinking more about like how people from space came and built them.
Oh, that that's something you believe?
Nate, we need to talk. Welcome back. So glad you guys could join us. I am here once again with my best friend Nathan Pepin. How's it going today, Pepin?
Yo, yo, I am doing well, and here, Meter, today, how are you?
I'm doing great. Could be having a better hair day, but it's okay because I got my Extra Life shirt on. Play games for kids.
I mean, if we're being honest, part of the issue you have is you're comparing your hair to mine, which it'll never stack up, so there's that.
That's very fair. That's very fair. But today we're talking about aliens. We're talking about aliens today, Nate.
So aliens are like a really weird subject, and I've thought a lot about them. But I feel like we're going to be on maybe two opposites but similar ends to this. I don't really know where you stand, to be honest. We never really talked about aliens. I think it came up in one conversation there. We talked about God or something. I don't know why, but I don't think we've touched on it much beyond that. What are your general thoughts, Peter?
There's definitely aliens, but I don't know that they've been to Earth.
What makes you believe both those statements?
I think with a proposed infinite Earth or universe, it's just a mathematical, like, it has to be the case that there's some other sort of life out there. And I don't know that they've been here to Earth, especially not like building pyramids and stuff. That just seems kind of a bit far-fetched.
Yeah, so I think I am pretty much the same opinion as you. So we can discuss maybe what other people believe and kind of our takes on that. But it's the argument kind of goes that if you take the size of the universe, the probability that life will kind of form is pretty high in some sort of local area. Let's like take the solar system, or I mean, obviously, it's chance here is the solar system is like a one because there is life. But just take any given solar system or any given like region of space, the chances of life forming there is very, very low. But if you take enough space, the chances start becoming higher and higher. It's like, imagine you roll like a million sided die and you're trying to guess what number it is. The chance you're going to get that right is very, very low. But if you roll enough times, you're eventually going to get it right. It's just a mathematical probability. So that's kind of the basic argument there. And that's been an argument that a lot of scientists and philosophers have used as well to justify that aliens likely exist if we take everything to be serious with how we understand universe, such as the fact that if you look at the space far enough, you can actually see these superclusters of galaxy like revolving around each other. Like the Milky Way galaxy is astronomical. We can't even imagine the size of it. And we can't imagine space, the space between the Earth and the Sun, let alone that size. So you have these clusters of galaxies rotating or revolving around clusters of galaxies. So start getting that kind of territory. It just seems like it would be likely. But what would you say is the main opposition to that? When people say life maybe does not exist outside Earth?
Well, two things. First, I want to say that I know in high school I think it was whatever the last year we did of science, because every year they changed what we did. They talked about aliens and they had us do two different mathematical formulas One was proving that aliens don't exist, and one was proving that aliens definitely do exist.
Hmm.
So it's very interesting that despite, mathematical probability and all that, there was still a way to mathematically say, well, this math says that it's not the case. So it's just interesting that scientists won't agree, even, and mathematicians, even down to, well, it's a mathematical, like, it has to work out that way, but does it?
Hmm. Hmm.
I think a lot of people's biggest opposition to are there aliens is man, there's a lot of things to touch on that. What do you define as an alien? Is a single cell organism on another planet alien, or does it need to have some sort of sentience? Um, and do they have to have any sort of? Are we talking about just any alien in general, or something comparable to us or more
Hmm.
advanced than us? And then finally, what about Jesus?
Is Jesus an alien? Is that where we're going?
Oh, I I mean, yes, and more along the lines of, I think a lot of people use religion to say there's not aliens.
Uh-huh. Hmm. Right, right. So one thing I want to touch on that you said is this idea of like suitability for the concept of alien. Because I guess just the question is there life out there? Number two, if there is something that is comparable to life, like what's the criterion, right? Because we can define life pretty easy here on Earth, but it's possible that if there's life on other planets or somewhere else, that it may not be at all like life here. And if that's the case, how can we determine if that's life or not? Like for instance, we might get to the point with certain computer AI where it'll start to take on, say, a lifelike quality, but there's going to be like that uncanny valley, or it's going to be like that sort of metric we have to make, say, this is living. Same thing if it's some sort of creature that's unknown to us, like completely different, it evolved through a whole different pathway, or maybe it's just different entirely. Maybe it's not done through, like, say, ordinary matter. I mean, that's unlikely, but who knows? If the universe is infinite, there could be like what a possible combinations we're not aware of. So, if even there was life, would it even be like here? And if even if there was, if it's not intelligent, doesn't matter, right? Because when people talk about there being life out there, it always like implies it's intelligent and that they'd kill us. But I feel like that's like another probability on another probability. You know what I mean? Like the chances that there's life out there, okay, that's pretty high. But the chance that life is intelligent is, I think, pretty low. I mean,
Mm.
you are gonna like end up with that, but how intelligent? I mean, how intelligent are we? We can go to space and everything, but it could be maybe we're not intelligent, or maybe we're super intelligent compared to other stuff. So I'll let you play off that for a second.
Quick shout out to Christopher Ball in chat. Super fan Chris Ball. What's shaking?
To us
Dude, aliens, man. Aliens are shaking. They're
is, I
shaking
think,
down
pretty
our
low.
solar system for all those space bucks. And we got to get on board with having some space bucks so that when they come here and hold us up for ransom, we can pay them off. I think, maybe we are the aliens that will go to another planet first and visit them and have them be like of lower intelligence to us, and then we try and kill them all, because that sounds like something we'd do.
I don't know if we would kill them all. I think we'd do it unintentionally, but I think the minds that would be wanting to go to another planet, they would be more there for study and kind of gaining stuff. I mean, like maybe they would kill them for like scientific research in the same way that we kill like rodents and like stuff like that.
I mean, you say that, and that might have used to have been the case, but the people who are now going to space are all looking to do so for financial gain.
Mhm.
So if they, like, let's say you found a really cool place, like what have humans done every time they've gone to a place that there's another life form already there and they want it?
Mhm.
They just go in and they murder everybody. And then they say, oh, look what we discovered. First life to be on this planet.
Mhm. So I'm gonna disagree here a little bit, and maybe it's gonna get more insidious the way I'm gonna frame this.
Hmm.
So I think we go and murder things when those things are competitive rivals, right?
Hmm.
Where maybe there's some resource that we want, and we will go and we take that resource through force because if we don't get access to that. But I think there's a more modern approach, and the previous approach was kind of taken out. The previous approach was more like something that the Khans would do, Genghis Khan and all of them. So they would just like raid places and go to the next place. Vikings were doing that a lot. I mean, it's pretty common. But then you have kind of the next step above that, which is more like you go to a place and you start farming, right? So you don't kill everything that's there. Rather, you now domesticate it and you farm it and you try to get like profit. So essentially, that thing is the resource in itself, and you don't want to kill your resource in the same way we wouldn't want to kill cows. Like, we do want to kill cows, but we try to breed more cows to get more cows because the cows are the resource.
So you're saying that British colonialism does not fall under the same idea as Genghis Khan? Because I firmly disagree with you.
Oh, yeah?
Yeah. Come over, push people off their land, and when they don't want to move, you murder them. That's not farming Native Americans. That's Genghis Khanning them.
So I don't think that is quite what I'm talking about. I'm talking more about like, let's say there's like a colony, right? So like the British colonies, they used the existing population and they were trying to get taxes off them or resources, right? They're trying to utilize that population for like, say, a farming need, not trying to push them away. They weren't trying to occupy that area. I mean, they were trying to take control of it, but it's the same way that you might take control of, say, like a bunch of cows out in a field. You put fences around them and you start kind of controlling them and you start trying to breed them, get resources from them. It's kind of a different approach.
I don't understand
Okay.
how you're viewing it that way. That doesn't make much sense to me. I'm talking about the natives who were already there on that land before the British even got there. Not the British who came there in the first place, and then the British were taxing the British.
Okay. So I'm making an analogy about like cows and everything. Like, I'm not trying to get too much into the political side.
I don't understand who's the cow in the situation. That's the problem.
So, okay, this is getting too complicated to this one. Let's just move past this. Because we're just gonna get.
Sounds like us. Make it too complicated and then just move past it.
Well, because I feel like I'm getting confused, and I don't really want to talk about politics.
Okay, didn't realize this was politics.
Yeah, well, because I don't know about the British too much. Like, I know that there's been instances of like in my mind, there's a difference between, say, just going and killing everybody, like what happened with the Native Americans. So that was a pure instance of like, say, like Genghis Khan, just going in, pillaging and just kind of taking people. And then there's been other instances where it's not quite like that, and they instead keep the existing base population, and they of course will kind of have it there a bit more, but it's not so much about, say, killing that population or kind of taking over that land. It's more about using that population to do things for you.
Do you think alien cow milk is good?
Probably. So the only thing I'm trying to say with this is that I don't think they would kill all the aliens. I think they would use them like livestock. Or I think that's what we would do. Use them more for our benefit, and there'll probably be more aliens in the end than there were to begin with, because we just like breed the heck out of them.
So how far away will we have to travel to find an alien?
It could be within the solar system, right? If some people are to be believed, because there's some people who talk about like, say, the moons on Neptune or whatever, and how there is enough water there and there potentially could be life. But I'm very skeptical of that, because I think a lot of what this is are scientists trying to get funding for their research projects. You know what I mean? Because I'll give an example here. This is not necessarily with aliens, but it's like, I used to read these science websites that would give like headlines, and almost every other headline was about a cure for cancer or a cure for some disease, right? And how it's great and it's going to solve everything. And almost every headline was like that, about some massive thing. And I got really excited. And then like years later, I'd be like, none of this stuff actually exists, right? Like there was research done, But these headlines and the way they're portraying this is just a way to get more funding because they don't have funding for their research. And they have to talk it up like that because otherwise their project's dead in the water. They're not going to get money. It's not to say that they're not good people, they're not trying their best, and not even that these projects may not be fruitful, but it's unlikely they're as fruitful as they're kind of portraying to be because it's all about like their end. And same with scientists here, like they want to make people want to fund projects to go to Neptune or to go to other places, to fund just research into that because that's where their interest is. And there is possibly a high gain to that, but I do think it's like a huge conflict of interest. Like it's kind of like McDonald's making a commercial and saying going to McDonald's because we're great. This is something that's awesome. I mean, of course they're going to say that, and of course these people are going to say that because that's what their interest is. Number one, but number two, that they believe that they have value there and they want to portray that value to you, and they'll hype it up to make you to actually fund it.
So what's the value in finding life on Neptune's moon?
So I think there's two different things there. So there is, at least locally, so the value, this is where I think it's a little bit of a lie because they'll talk about life on Neptune's moon and stuff like that to get people excited about it, because if that's what you think you're doing by supporting these projects, you're going to like support it more. But I think that's a slight lie because I think nobody really thinks they're going to find life there. Like it's a possibility, right? But they're probably not going to find it. That's more about the research aspects, just going to the moon, collecting samples, and seeing what it's like there, seeing the atmosphere. More of the basic rudimentary science, kind of like going to some like random part of the world and collecting soil samples just to see what it's like. Stuff that people aren't as interested with. Now, if there was life on Neptune's moon, there could be a lot of interesting things there because you could actually study how that life exists, what makes it up, and how it functions. You could see maybe if there's some sort of correlation between its DNA and our DNA, or if it has DNA, it's probably going to have some sort of DNA. But you could see the correlations there, and there might be stuff you can actually like utilize with it. Maybe you can create certain, things that could actually help us. Maybe it has these certain properties, kind of like anything, right? You go to the Amazon, you might be some sort of microbe there that can cure cancer or cure some disease, kind of like penicillin did with antibiotics.
But the most important question that everybody's asking is, what does it do for meter?
What do you want it to do for you?
I want a cotton candy like substance that tastes like lasagna. Can it do that?
Potentially.
Take my money.
You do bring up a great point, though. Like, how do you think that, like on the everyday, how does searching for aliens or alien existence really change your everyday life?
It doesn't.
Yeah.
Most things don't change my everyday life.
There's a scientist, Neil deGrasse Tyson, who brings up some good points about like science in general. Like people will look at quantum mechanics and say, this is like airy-fairy science stuff that has no impact in the real world. Like, what does it matter? But if you do a little bit of research, you find out that like your cell phone, any sort of computer, uses transistors, and transistors function only because we know about quantum mechanics. They have like this aspect where the electrons kind of go over a gap via quantum entanglement or something like that. I don't think it's quantum entanglement, but they have these features and functions that we know through quantum mechanics. So a lot of people are saying that obviously don't know like the full impact of the scientific research, but I think the claims that there would be these huge gains from aliens research and everything are a little bit hopeful. It's possible, just like as it's possible you can go to some random soil and find some microbe that could change everything, but it's unlikely.
But I mean, what about super smart aliens? What about UFOs that the government's hiding?
So what's your opinion on that?
I mean, hasn't the government like confirmed there's like UFO shit that I think was talked about within the last year?
Yeah, there's just been some big stories on that, and where it's a little bit confusing is the term UFO is very literal in this sense. unidentified flying object. People will associate UFO with being alien, but it's not necessarily the same. You could have an UFO, which is just some sort of weather balloon, cliche example, or it could just be a meteor in the sky. It could be anything that you see in the sky, which is flying and unidentified, right? So it could be a good number of things. The only thing that they know is that they seem to have good footage of it, or good enough evidence that these things were real, certain metrics about it, and they don't know what it is.
But if the government can't pinpoint what it is, like if it's a weather balloon, they should be able to see what it is pretty easily, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Didn't the government say they were aliens?
No, didn't say they were aliens. I don't think so.
I think they did.
I think they said they were unidentified flying objects.
Hold on, I'm going to Google while we talk about this.
And I believe that the story was that the properties of these things were outside of what we could really believe or produce, because some object was flying faster than we could actually ever fly or something like that. It had certain aspects that are a little bit unbelievable.
Government UFO report won't rule out visitors from space. UFOs are being taken very seriously by the U.S. government.
Mm-hmm.
Wow, those are well-phrased titles.
Yep. And part of my skepticism with this is, of course, nothing can be ruled out, right? If there's enough evidence for something, or if there's enough reason to believe it, sure, we can go with it, right? My opinion on this is not set in stone. But I think my problem is the fact just that the U.S. government says this does not mean it's valid, or it doesn't rule it out, because number one, they're probably clickbait. Number two, there's plenty of people who are studying this stuff from outer space who believe aliens could exist there, right? Mm-hmm. And just because they're scientists, or just because they're these sort of people, doesn't mean they are fully rational at this point. They might have a higher aim, and they might want to find it, right? It doesn't necessarily lend credence to it, because, to put it this way, if there's someone who believed UFOs existed, they got a degree because they just started studying in school, got a job in the government, rose to the ranks, that person will be saying it, even if there's not extreme evidence for it. It's ultimately people is what I'm trying to say. There is an air of authority there. It does make it more likely, as per Bayesian probability, but it doesn't mean it's guaranteed.
Would you be scared if aliens came?
I don't know what I would do. Kind of depends on what they'd be like.
Mm-hmm. Which is, of course, leads to the most important question that everyone's asking right now. And that's, would you fuck it? That's the number one question.
So I guess the main aspect to consider is, what do they look like? And what would they feel like, too?
What do you want them to feel like?
Because here's the thing. It's maybe they look terrible, but then someone does it and they tell you it feels like another world, right?
Mm-hmm.
They get cliche there. You might be like, okay, that's kind of dumb. But then someone tells you, it's imagine a squid and an octopus, but also a can of beavers. It might just make you curious enough to partake.
Mm-hmm. So you're saying you need somebody to sell it to you?
I think so. Someone who's been there, done it, and just has life experience from it.
What if they're really hot?
Well, yeah, obvious, yes.
Okay, so what if the boys are really hot too? Will you go gay?
Well, see, here's the thing though. If they're aliens, how do we know they're gonna have a male female sort of thing?
Well, I'm saying they do.
Okay. I mean, sure. If they're really hot, sure.
Nice.
I don't really know if it would be a sexuality thing though.
Yeah.
If they were just human looking, then I think that application of the words would be useful. If they're very humanoid, but if they weren't, then what does gender even mean in that context?
Yeah, what does gender even mean in any context?
Mhm.
So if aliens came down, the first thing you'd do is try and fuck it, and then what? Then what would you do?
So I think communication is the biggest thing, right?
Uh huh. Yeah.
And how would you try to communicate to them first?
English. That's the one I know.
I would probably try using pictures.
Yeah.
That
What about telepathy?
well, I haven't learned that yet.
I know. That's why I said English.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Uh,
Pictures.
I think it's likely that if aliens come to us, they'll probably know enough to communicate with us. Because if they can arrive here, yeah. But
Well, I don't know. What if we could in theory arrive at a planet? Like, let's say we just launched somebody at a random angle out into space and they landed on a planet, right?
Mhm.
We have the technology to land on a populated planet. That doesn't necessarily mean that that person would be able to communicate with the alien.
That's true. That's true. I think they would do enough research because I think we would do research too, right? Because we would like study it from afar. But maybe it depends on how prepared they were. Also, like I guess it depends what they're doing too, because you could have aliens that are like, somehow they can see through like what planets to visit, and maybe they have some sort of faster than light sort of travel. That way they can get there, like, because the problem is, let's say there's alien life, like say 100 million light years away, right?
Mm-hmm.
And you see that life there somehow because you have very very good technology. You're like,
Good
okay,
eyes.
let's go travel that way. I mean, 100 million years, that life might be dead by the time you get there.
Mm-hmm.
So
Might be dead when you saw it in the first place.
that's true too.
What if? Okay, so what if they come to us and they're alive, and so you would use pictures?
Mhm.
What would the first thing you're trying to say to them be? What pictures would you use?
I would probably try to give a story of humanity,
Oh,
something real basic, like something you might see like on a caveman drawing or something. I think it'd be the basic sort of stuff. Like I don't know what to do. Like me, human, this, maybe show some of the stuff we do and how we reproduce and how we communicate and everything. Uh, I don't think it'd be too much different from imagine you found somebody who was like Aboriginal, like just isolated from society, and you bring them into society. Probably something similar that way if they couldn't speak the language.
mm-hmm. I would definitely not start by telling the history of humanity. That seems like a very bad idea.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime I think about like communicating with an alien and like what you would want to talk about, I feel like it's like trying to get across an idea, and part of that would be like getting across like what the intention there is. And I feel like a good way to think about that would be like with music, and at least like what music would do to us. So let's say you go to a planet, right, and you can't speak their language, and they start like they play music to try to like explain or get across the point of like what their intentions are or what they're about, and they're telling the history of humanity. That would just be like a war theme for like 2000 years. I feel like it would just be very aggressive in that regard. So the concern there would be like telling the history of humanity would kind of get across the wrong point, because our history is very much about like pushing forward, and what we might consider overcoming a lot of adversity and issues, but I would probably consider just being very aggressive. And that might not be the message we want to get across.
Mm-hmm. I mean, you bring up a great point, and maybe I should say like the 4-year-old history of humanity, like the feel good happy one, but maybe I mean more like the history of you as a human, right? Like I'm thinking more like we grow up, we're small like this, we're babies, big heads.
So the life cycle.
Yeah, the life cycle.
Okay.
Like the history of a human, I suppose, which is varied, but you can grab these certain things outside of that. and maybe you could talk about how humans used to live and how they live now. And I'm maybe this is me being like I don't know, annoying, but I feel like if there was an alien life form, they would have the same sort of terrible backstory that we would too, especially if they're traveling far, far away. No?
Why?
So my reasoning for this is just from Darwinian selection, because nature is brutal because it's all about capturing resources at the expense of others, to propagate your genes. And there's an argument that Richard Dawkins made, which is that if there is alien life out there, that they would have arrived through, like, say, natural selection sort of thing. Maybe they hit a point where they could go outside of natural selection, which humans are kind of doing right now. Like, we kind of are, but aren't fighting about resources. It's more like the intellectual space in some ways right now. So there could be some sort of thing there, but I think they would have arrived through their dominance and power, or whatever it might be that they have, like that level they are, through some sort of violent means, you could say, or some sort of forceful means, through taking, through pillagings, through exploitation. And again, maybe to move beyond that, but I think that's going to be the same story for them.
Just because Earth came to be, just because the survival of the fittest on Earth was through violent means, whoever had the best teeth and claws, and eventually whoever had the greatest intellect to be able to utilize tools, and I think now the brain is really the big difference maker that's made humans better. Is it not possible that a planet could have grown based on complete symbiosis and complete, like, the things that survived were the things that worked together the best, and the things that worked within its own ecosystem the best, and therefore it was not advantageous to kill and destroy, but rather to work together and build? I can see a planet where that's a possibility.
I don't think that's likely, just for genetic reasons. So again, this is just assuming that the species would be coming forth through Darwinian evolution. There's a problem called, like, what's it called? Evolutionary stability. So essentially, imagine you have a population, and then there's like a one that will, okay, maybe it's a population of monkeys, let's say. And so there's one sect of that population where, let's say, they will groom each other and they will, say, pick off bugs. And then there's another one where they will get bugs picked off, but they won't pick off bugs on others. And then there's another where it will only do it when it reciprocates. So you talk about, like, these three different, say, phenotypes. So let's say these are tied to genes. The way it kind of plays out is if you have a bunch of angels who will just pick bugs off, and they can actually cooperate with each other. That's evolutionarily stable, because if they pick bugs off people, then they'll have people pick bugs off them, and then that can kind of feed itself. But as soon as you get, say, one individual that will have genes that will kind of just, like, not pick bugs off others, that individual now has an extreme advantage. That's going to cause some sort of evolutionary advantage in general, and then that gene is going to spread throughout the society, and then it's going to throw off the stability. So now you're going to start getting more, say, devils, let's say, or more takers, and then you kind of get some sort of weird equilibrium. So what ends up happening in this sort of dynamic is you start getting more of it can go one way or the other, but a lot of times you get, say, a reciprocity sort of thing, like primates have. But you might have other species where there's no reciprocity. Like, it's just kind of like you just don't do anything with each other. Right? You don't have that social interaction. You're all just kind of devils. It's very selfish. So I think just my main claim here is that a population of angels is unlikely to exist because it's not very stable, because the advantage given to one by not following that angel strategy is very, very high.
No.
No?
I think that you just have a confirmation bias there, where you're using examples from Earth, and I'm talking about an alien race where that I'm not able to propose, here's the scenario where this would work. I'm saying that I can imagine that in the universe there could be like just I don't think it's necessary that any alien society or whatever alien race will have grown up just like our planet. I
Mhm.
think that that's not necessarily necessary. That's not a definitive thing. Um, and uh, I just think it's kind of we have a bias here where this is the only way we've ever seen life work, so this is how life works. But I think that's the whole point of thinking about aliens, is trying to think about ways that things could work outside of what we currently already know.
Mhm. Like I could maybe agree with your argument if it's like many generations beyond, right? So I think the starting point has to be brutal, right? Because they're starting from atoms, right? Right. Atoms can't have like that sort of like sense of cooperation or anything, like like they're lifeless. And maybe as you get to a certain point, there's that inflection. Like maybe you could like hypothesize that after a certain point, humanity or whatever takes after humanity would get to that kind of point of cooperation. And you can also argue maybe it's some points of cooperation even within current species on Earth, because like the idea here is that our multicellular life was actually single cellular at one point, and then these different cells they ended up cooperating at a point where they actually created multicellular. So like ribosomes and DNA and mitochondria, they were actually separate things at some point. I'm getting this slightly wrong, but they actually just started hanging out together, and eventually it just kind of became one thing, which is why like there's actually some material, some stuff you pass on, which is actually not genetic, but it's actually something else because that was originally a different species. So I agree with you. It's possible at some point, but I just don't think it's there to begin with. But then again, my imagination may not be good enough for this.
Mm. I guess I'm thinking more, not obviously at an atomical level where there's no thought, but that it's an evolution that's based on brain power,
Mhm.
and that's based on empathy rather than being based on ability to overcome the lack of resources, or it was just a lot of the ability to out survive those around you. It's more of an empathy and brain based thing. I don't think the brain became like the biggest difference maker in on Earth for a very long time. And I think that could have been intelligence could have developed faster than teeth and claws did here on Earth.
I see. So the idea is that I mean with Earth, the fact that intelligence happened to be a very well selected trait, at least for the last couple thousand years, is just happenstance.
Mm-hmm.
And the approach has been more kind of like you're saying, teeth and claws, like this kind of force. But if we started with another species where maybe it took more of an intelligence type approach to begin with,
Mm-hmm.
that species could have a totally different, say, evolutionary path. Because if that, say, if that, what do you call it, the founding species, that initial thing, if that started off with that approach, or started developing that approach to begin with, maybe all the paths beyond that would be completely different and completely unlike what we see on Earth.
Mm-hmm. I mean, and the opposite is of course possible as well. That intelligence never becomes. We go to a planet and intelligence never became, and instead, what we end up seeing is like these absurdly dominant, single, like terrifying, all claws and teeth creature. That it just murders without cause.
Mm-hmm. I think that's more likely just because we take any random sample from Earth and that's what we get.
Mm-hmm.
And just that's kind of the way I think natural selection goes. But I do think that you have made me think a little bit more about this because maybe initial starting point is good. And also just to clarify for listeners, intelligence isn't necessarily a superior trait in evolution. It's superior for certain things, but it's not like some end all be all. It's not something that's better than the other thing. It's all context specific. Intelligence actually might be terrible in a lot of different scenarios, which is why most creatures on Earth don't have intelligence. It happened to be, useful during this one period in, say, the history of Earth, but it's not likely to be, superior in all instances. In other instances, maybe it's just a fight or fight, like it's like a fight sort of mentality, or maybe a defensive sort of thing.
Oh, the ultimate defensive species. We would definitely bring them to Earth and use them in war.
I'm just imagining like giant crabs.
Yeah.
Like not the ones in the sea, but the ones like on your pubes.
Are crabs aliens?
Kind of. I mean, this is kind of like a aside here, but I watch like a lot of like nature documentaries and stuff like that, and you start looking at some of these animals that are on Earth, and they're all pretty much aliens. Like, as far as I'm concerned, like the stuff that you're familiar with is stuff you consider just like, oh yeah, that's from Earth, that's natural. But then you start learning about like jellyfish. Like, really? Like, jellyfish do seem a little bit normal. But then you start learning like how they reproduce. Like, for people who don't know, like jellyfish come from like a type of sea anemone. So like there's like sea anemone, which is kind of like that thing in Finding Nemo. And so it's just kind of stuck there. And then what it does, it kind of releases like these spore-like things. These spore-like things, you can imagine like a sea anemone, but like an upside down, like those like little tentacle type things or bristles. They start becoming like the jellyfish kind of stinger things. And then this kind of just start going around and they get bigger, and then they become jellyfish. And then eventually, they might settle down and release their spores or whatever and kind of attach back to the sea basin. But it's kind of how jellyfish works, and it's really fucked up. Like, it's really interesting, but it's not very natural, or it's not a natural way of seeing things. It's very alien to me.
Don't slugs shoot darts?
Yep. And slugs are also kind of weird too. I mean, not all species, but there's certain ones, maybe it's snails. So they're hermaphroditic. There's no male or female sex there. But essentially, they'll fight each other, and then essentially they'll kind of shoot like a stinger or inject their penis or whatever you want to say into the other. They'll fight. Whoever wins will do that. And essentially the way it kind of works is that the one that loses becomes the female, and then the one that wins becomes the male. And the one that loses has to pay the penalty of carrying the baby, which costs resources and time and everything like that. So there's a weird sort of like thing, which is it's a very alien sort of thing. That nothing like that exists in like an everyday life that we think, but it's there. It's just not viewed. And so many other creatures and animals like that, like ants, for instance.
I do want to go back to something. You said you'd have sex with an alien if they were hot enough.
Mm-hmm.
You said you don't care what gender it is as long as they're hot. Does that apply to humans too? If there was a really hot dude?
Oh, sure. Yeah. I mean, what are you going to do?
Awesome.
Well, so it's unlikely, right? So this is like a little bit of a gripe I have with something, because I talked to this girl a little while back, and she was talking about like guys or something, and she's like, "Oh, I'm not interested in this guy because he's not my type. He's got blonde hair, and I'm into brown haired guys."
Yeah.
And it's like, well, what if you see like a blonde haired guy that's just like really like this attracts you, right? And you're just like, yeah, let's go for it.
Yeah. It's the exception that makes the rule.
Right. I mean, you have to be open to that possibility, right? There's a post on Reddit I read where it's like there's a woman who identified as being lesbian, and she had only dated women her entire life, and she met this one guy, and she married him eventually, right? And she's like, I'm not attracted to any men except for this one guy, and I don't really get it. It doesn't really make sense to me, but he's the only guy I actually find attractive. So I think it's possible that could exist. It's unlikely, but I think if you approach it seriously, there's always that possibility.
So sexuality is a spectrum.
Yeah, to some degree. I think it's primarily binary in most people, but that's like 80%. It's like a Pareto distribution. Like there's always going to be some portion of anything which is going to be very binary or typical, But then you start getting to the other percenters there, and it starts getting more complex. And maybe there's more complexities on the binary side as well. But I don't think things are as straightforward as people think.
Mm-hmm. Which it seems like all of humanity is slowly starting to come around to that, except for those who are like so absurdly against even considering the possibility of something other than what they think is true from their own biases, that they're not even willing to consider anything. And I think that's kind of true of the thought of like life on other planets as well, that a lot of people don't even want to consider the idea that it's possible that there are other creatures out there who might be smarter than us, or more dangerous than us, or more not dangerous than us, or way hotter.
Mm-hmm. Way hotter. Mm-hmm. I think one idea I think about a lot is just how things can be structured differently with other life forms, because like humans, like we have like the very individualistic sort of thing. You take other species like ants, and the best way to think of like an ant is, I mean, ants are weird in so many different ways. So you have the individual nature, right? But an ant could be seen kind of more as like a larger organism spread through many individual ants, which it's not entirely true because they have slightly different genetics and everything, but they almost act like as if they're a single organism, and that's because they're very related and certain evolutionary pressures that kind of cause them to act towards that way. And then you get into certain concepts of like hive minds with science fiction, but there's going to be many configurations of, say, individuals that we can't really understand or comprehend. Like we can kind of maybe come up with some stuff. Like the hive mind idea is very out there. We could talk about maybe distributed systems and computer AI that could be very interesting, because maybe there's part of the brain here, part over here, in all these different areas. But like what's unimaginable for us to contemplate is just how other life could exist differently than us, and how that could just be so interesting.
So elves are of great interest to the scientific community.
Elves?
Yeah, alien I'd like to fuck, obviously.
I like that. That's good.
Hold on. Elf.com. Click here to buy. GoDaddy. Hold on a second. This is important. Elf.com. Elf. It's $35,000 if I want to buy it right now. Plus $18.99 a year. But elfnow.com. Oh boy.
I'll contribute about $10 to that.
Elfhub.com. There it is. I like how that's one of the top 5 results. Elf Pro. Elf Hub. This is good. Elf. Elfcity.com. Sorry. Okay, we can get back to elf.life, $2.
For those who don't know, Meter has an obsession with domain names.
Mm-hmm.
Like, he thinks of any good domain name, and he will buy it just in case.
Yeah, that's a really good domain name. I blame Justin McElroy for that, okay? He does the same thing live on his podcast. But elf.com is a very good one. Someone give me $35,000 plus $18.99 a year, please.
We can do a Kickstarter.
Okay.
No, the question is, if you buy that domain name, are you going to start populating a website with lots of alien porn?
Yes.
Okay. That's good.
Anybody outside the US, so that'd be Dito Angel, would be alien porn if she comes here illegally.
Okay. Nice.
And that's it. And I'm gonna charge you $18.99 a year to visit the site, and it pays for itself.
So on the topic of alien porn, there was a video I watched from a YouTuber called Sitsnaps, and she's the one that I talked about before. She does like hentai reviews and stuff like that. It's hilarious. I mean, just watch her stuff because she's like so funny. but she did this one review for like a video game that's like a hentai sort of thing, and there's lots of aliens, sex, and weird stuff going on, and it's just like I can't relate to that too much. Like you start getting to, like interspecies or like inter-alien sort of stuff. It's kind of like what's going on with this? But you make a great point though. What if the alien was super hot?
Yeah. And like, what about the idea of spreading your genes to like, you know how it's good to have sex with people who are very not related to you? Like the further unrelated, the better.
Sure. Okay.
Yeah, it's good for your genes because then you don't get bad things happening.
Okay, but that doesn't
think about aliens.
I mean, I appreciate where you're going with this, but that doesn't quite work because we probably couldn't reproduce with aliens.
Yeah, but what if we could? You gotta try, Nate.
You can't just say, what if we could?
But you gotta try. You gotta try, right? It's science. Fucker for science, Nate.
So it's just a matter of like a scientific experiment.
Like, yeah, this is for science. And we'll videotape it for science and sell copies.
This is like that. I'm back on. There's a forum called Face Punch. There was a article that someone found from like a scientific paper or whatever. But the scientist, she like decided just to live in a tank with a dolphin for some reason, just to like study their behavior or whatever. Mm-hmm. And she was in the tank for a while, and then she started getting like very romantically attached to the dolphin, and eventually she let it copulate with her, and she described it like from a very scientific point of view, and it's the most cringy, funniest thing to read.
So I didn't know there were dolphin people.
Well, we've actually seen them like in person, but you never guess because for whatever reason the human genes are dominant.
Yeah. Oh, that was what that South Park episode was about.
Oh, fuck. That South Park episode is crazy.
So, human aliens, they would have legal rights on both planets, right? That's how that works.
Okay. Yeah.
They'd be an American citizen, but also a citizen.
Okay. Good point. Good point.
Would they be a built-in ambassador for peace between worlds?
I mean, I don't want peace. I want destruction. Only destruction. I want to wake up in the morning, smell bread, burning slightly, like it's toast.
Is bread what you named the baby?
Well, the baby's name is actually Historia Mustang.
Oh, that's a great name.
Yep.
This is a baby that's part Pepin, part fire alien.
Fire alien. I feel like we can't end this podcast.
Oh no, I was working towards it.
Okay, I'll let you go.
So fire aliens.
Fire aliens.
They're from the fire planet Mars.
Okay.
A different Mars though.
All
Mars 2. Science ran out of names for planets. So they named one Mars 2.
Okay, Mars 2.
And would it so 50% human, 50% alien? Is that how genetics works?
Well, see, we're assuming that the alien genetics don't have some sort of like a parasite like aspect to them.
Oh.
Because either they, so we could have like one or two things here. We could have like the alien genetics kind of like a wrapper around the humans, right? Like maybe it kind of hangs on, gives you some extra abilities, but it's like your human genes, but then just with an alien stuff like in you too, right? It's kind of two separate things, more symbiotic.
Alien fashion.
Alien fashion.
Think about it. They got fashion we ain't even seen yet.
Do you think they would wear clothes? Because I don't know if they would. I mean, actually, they probably would. Because as soon as you start like collecting stuff, you just like want to put it on your body, don't you?
Yeah, Alien Adam definitely ate that apple. Alien apple.
Yeah, it's like
got shame.
Like I got paper around this place. Like I just have lots of paper. Sometimes just like stick it on my body for no reason. Same with like bottle caps. Like just put it places, right?
Nate, we need to talk.